October 25th, 1944. A Japanese admiral raises his binoculars and sees something that should be absolutely impossible. There's an American destroyer out there, just a tiny ship weighing 2,000 tons, and it's turning directly toward his fleet. Not away, toward. Now, this admiral is commanding the Yamato, the biggest battleship ever built by any nation in human history. 70,000 tons of pure destruction. Behind him are three more battleships, 6 heavy cruisers, and 11 destroyers. This is the most powerful surface fleet Japan has assembled in years, and they have one job: punch through the Leyte Gulf and destroy the American invasion force. Thousands of defenseless transport ships, tens of thousands of soldiers on the beaches with nowhere to run. Standing in their way is basically nothing. 6 baby aircraft carriers that can barely fight, and 7 destroyers that should be screening convoys, not fighting battleships. The math is simple. The Japanese have 40 times the firepower. One hit from the Yamato would erase a destroyer from existence. This should be a massacre that's over in 30 minutes. And then this one American destroyer does the unthinkable. It charges, full speed, directly at them. The Japanese radio frequencies explode with confusion. Officers are shouting, "Which ships are attacking? How many? What is their formation?" And then someone says it, the words that will become legend. All of them are attacking, but one of them has gone completely insane. That ship is the USS Johnston, and what happens next is so crazy, so absolutely beyond anything that makes military sense, that 80 years later, historians still can't quite believe it happened. Here's the part that's going to blow your mind. The part that seems impossible, but is documented fact, verified by both American and Japanese records. This one destroyer is about to convince the most powerful naval force Japan has left that they're facing an entire American fleet. And they're going to make these battleships turn around and run away. And in doing so, they're going to save thousands of American lives and change the entire course of the Pacific War. I'm going to tell you exactly how it happened, and every single thing I'm about to say is verified historical fact. This is the story of the USS Johnston, and the day one ship decided that impossible odds just meant you had to fight harder. The setup. Let me paint the picture of how bad this situation really was. The Battle of Leyte Gulf is unfolding, the largest naval battle in human history. The Japanese have created this desperate plan. They're using their aircraft carriers as bait to lure Admiral Halsey's powerful Third Fleet away to the north. While Halsey chases those carriers with every battleship and fleet carrier the Americans have, the real punch is coming from Admiral Kurita's center force. They're going to sneak through the San Bernardino Strait and hit the landing forces from an unexpected direction. And it's working perfectly. Halsey has taken the bait and sailed north, leaving the door wide open. Standing in that door, completely by accident, is Taffy 3, 6 escort carriers, and 7 destroyers. That's it. Now, escort carriers aren't real aircraft carriers. They're basically cargo ships with flight decks welded on top. Thin hulls, weak engines, maximum speed of 18 knots. Their biggest guns are 5-inch pop guns. These were built fast and cheap to transport planes, not to fight battleships. The 7 destroyers protecting them are tough little ships, but they're designed for speed and torpedo attacks, not slugging matches with battleships. The USS Johnston weighs 2,100 tons and has 5-inch guns. The armor on her hull is half an inch thick in most places. A battleship's armor is measured in feet, not inches. At 6:37 in the morning, an American pilot on routine patrol radios back to Taffy 3, and his voice has this quality that makes everyone listening know immediately something is terribly wrong. "I've got surface contacts. Multiple large ships. They're headed right for you." The radio officer asks for clarification. There's a pause, and you can hear this pilot trying to convince himself that what he's seeing is real. "I've got battleships. 4 battleships, heavy cruisers. They're in battle formation and they're coming fast." For a moment, nobody moves because their brains are rejecting this information. The Japanese center force is supposed to be retreating. Admiral Halsey is supposed to be guarding this approach. This cannot be happening. And then the lookouts on Taffy 3 start seeing them with their own eyes. The morning fog lifts with the sunrise, and there on the horizon are shapes that make every experienced sailor's blood run cold. Pagoda masts, the distinctive tall structures of Japanese battleships rising like steel pyramids from the ocean. At 6:59 a.m., colored splashes start erupting around Taffy 3. Pink, red, yellow, green. The Japanese use different colored dyes in their shells so each ship can track its own shots. These splashes are enormous, some rising 200 feet high. Battleship main guns, and they're getting closer. The Japanese are finding their range. Admiral Clifton Spragg, commanding Taffy 3, immediately orders all ships to make smoke and run south at maximum speed. He sends out a radio message in plain language, not even bothering with codes because there's no time. Enemy surface force of 4 battleships, 7 cruisers, and 11 destroyers sighted 20 miles northwest, closing at 30 knots. He's basically screaming for help on an open channel, hoping somebody, anybody, is close enough to do something. Nobody is. The nearest American battleships are with Halsey, 300 miles north. Even if he turns around immediately, he's 6 hours away. Taffy's ND will be dead long before help arrives. Let me give you the actual numbers because they're staggering. The Japanese have the Yamato, whose 9 18-inch guns fire shells weighing 3,200 pounds each. Just the Yamato alone outweighs the entire American force combined. Then there are 6 heavy cruisers, each one individually outgunning the entire destroyer screen. The Japanese have 40 times the firepower. This isn't a battle. It's an execution, and everyone knows it. On the bridge of the USS Johnston, Commander Ernest Evans is standing perfectly still, watching the Japanese fleet emerge from the haze. His executing officer, Lieutenant Robert Hagen, is doing the mental math that every officer is doing right now. And that math leads to only one conclusion. They're all going to die today. But what Hagen doesn't know yet is that his captain has already made a decision so crazy, so completely outside normal military thinking, that it's going to take everyone a few minutes to understand what he's ordering them to do. Because Ernest Evans isn't planning to run. He's planning to attack. The Warrior. Let me tell you about Ernest Evans because you need to understand this man to understand what happens next. Evans was born in 1908 in Pawnee, Oklahoma. His mother was Creek Indian, his father part Cherokee, and they were dirt poor. But Evans had something inside him that poverty couldn't touch. He was brilliant, and he had this burning intensity that everyone who met him remembered forever. He got into the Naval Academy in 1927, which was not easy for a poor kid from Oklahoma with Native American heritage. The Academy was an old boys club, but Evans didn't care about fitting in. He cared about being the best. He graduated in 1931 and worked his way up through the Depression when promotions were frozen and good officers were getting forced out. By 1943, he'd made commander and got command of a brand new destroyer being commissioned in Seattle, the USS Johnston. On commissioning day, October 27, 1943, Evans gathered his entire crew on deck, all 327 men. He stood where everyone could see him and gave a speech nobody who heard it ever forgot. "This is a fighting ship. I intend to go in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off right now." He paused and looked at them, really looked at them. "The Johnston will fight. She will fight against any odds. She will fight to the last shell, the last torpedo. I will never retreat from an enemy force. Some of you won't make it home, but when your grandchildren ask what you did in this war, you'll tell them you served on a ship that mattered." Not a single man left. Evans was 5'8", stocky, with dark skin showing his Native American heritage, and he wore it like a badge of honor. He had these black eyes that seemed to burn right through you. One crew member said later, "The captain had eyes like a hawk. When he looked at you, you felt like he could see everything, your fear, your courage, your soul." Evans had a saying he'd repeat during training: "If you can't hit them hard, hit them crazy." The officers would laugh because they thought it was just motivational talk. They didn't understand what he meant. They were about to learn. For a year, Evans drilled his crew relentlessly. The Johnston became known as one of the tightest-run destroyers in the Pacific Fleet. He pushed them harder than any other captain, and he never asked them to do anything he wouldn't do himself. He'd be in the engine room during drills, covered in grease, helping the mechanics. He'd be in the gun mounts loading shells. The crew loved him for it. Lieutenant Robert Hagen, his executive officer, said later, "The skipper wasn't like other officers. He didn't put on airs, but you knew he was the most dangerous man on that ship. Not dangerous to us,
dangerous to the enemy. You just knew that he would never, ever quit. The Johnston saw standard action through 1944, shore bombardments, convoy escorts, nothing crazy. And then came October 25th, and everything Evans had been preparing his crew for was about to be tested in ways nobody imagined. The decision. On the Johnston's bridge that morning, more shells are landing now, walking closer to the carriers with each salvo. The Japanese gunners are good. They're going to find their target soon. The radio crackles. Admiral Sprague's voice. "Small boys attack! Small boys attack!" That's the code. Small boys means destroyers. Sprague's ordering them to attack the Japanese fleet to buy time for the carriers to escape. It's essentially a death sentence, but it's the only play they have. Evans turns to his officer of the deck. "Sound general quarters. All hands to battle stations." The alarm rings through the ship. Men run to their positions. Gun crews climb into their mounts. In the engine room, Lieutenant Jesse Cochran knows what's coming. He turns to his men. "Give me everything she's got, every boiler. We're going to need full power." Up on the bridge, Evans is still watching the Japanese fleet. Hagen says, "Skipper, we should lay smoke and coordinate with the other destroyers." Evans turns and looks at his XO with those burning black eyes. "Bob, smoke won't save those carriers. They're too slow and the Japs are too close. So what do we do?" He points at the Japanese heavy cruisers. "We attack. Now, before they close any more. We're going to close to torpedo range and put our fish into those cruisers. Then we're going to raise so much hell they think we're a cruiser, not a destroyer." Hagen stares at him. "Captain, we're one ship. That's the entire Japanese center force." "I know what it is," Evans says, his voice hard now, "and they know what we are, or they think they do. They think we're going to lay smoke and run. So we're going to do the one thing they're not expecting." He turns to the helmsman. "All ahead flank. Come left to course 300. The helmsman hesitates, his hands frozen, because he understands that course points directly at the Japanese fleet. "Belay that," Hagen says instinctively. Evans turns to Hagen and his voice is quiet but carries absolute command. "Bob, I gave an order. Either the helmsman follows it or you relieve me of command right now. Your choice." The bridge goes silent. Everyone's watching. Hagen looks at his captain and sees the same certainty he saw on commissioning day, the same burning intensity. He makes his choice. "Helmsman, you heard the captain. Come left to 300. All ahead flank." The wheel turns. The Johnston's bow comes around. The engines roar as the throttles open and the turbines spin faster. The deck vibrates so hard tools are rattling everywhere. The USS Johnston, all 2,100 tons of her, turns directly towards the most powerful battleship fleet ever assembled and begins to accelerate. In the engine room, the temperature climbs as every boiler is pushed to maximum. The turbines are screaming. One engineer shouts, "The skipper's gone crazy." Chief Cochran grabs him. "Maybe, but he's our crazy. Now get those turbines singing." The Johnston is charging now, 35 knots, bow cutting through waves, every gun tracking targets. They've gotten the Japanese fleet's attention, and the Japanese are turning their guns towards them. The charge. The first salvo from the Japanese heavy cruiser Kumano falls 400 yards short, throwing up massive pink columns that drench the Johnston's deck. Evans doesn't flinch. He watches the fall of shot like he's studying a chessboard. He says, "They're finding their range. Helmsman, come right 5 degrees. The second salvo lands 200 yards short, closer. The third salvo straddles the Johnston perfectly, shells on both sides, water crashing over the deck. Multiple fire control radars painting us, at least 3 ships targeting us. They've got the Japanese fleet's attention all right. Evans' voice comes over the intercom, steady and clear. "All stations, this is the captain. We are closing to torpedo range. Stand by for torpedo attack. Gun crews, commence firing at 8,000 yards. The range is closing fast. 12 miles. 11. 10. The ocean around the Johnston is erupting with geysers. The Japanese have 4 ships shooting at them now. The volume of fire is incredible. 9,000 yards. 8,000 yards. 4 miles. Commence firing, Evans orders. The Johnston's 5 guns open up and the sound is like thunder. The guns fire in rapid succession, muzzle flashes lighting up the deck. Shells arc towards the cruisers, and at this range they're hitting. The Johnston's gunners are aiming for superstructure, trying to knock out fire control. On the Kumano, Japanese officers watch in disbelief as this destroyer keeps coming. One officer says, "This ship is insane. Why doesn't it run? 7,000 yards. The first hit lands. A Japanese shell punches through the Johnston's hull and explodes inside, killing 3 men instantly, starting a fire. Damage control rushes in. Evans barely reacts. Damage report. Fire in cruise quarters, multiple casualties. Damage control is on it. Continue the attack. 6,000 yards. 3 miles. The Johnston is weaving, zigzagging, making herself harder to hit while still closing. 5,000 yards. Launch torpedoes, Evans orders. All tubes, full spread. 10 torpedoes leap from the Johnston's tubes, splash into the ocean and begin their runs towards the Japanese cruisers. Hard right rudder, come to course 180. Let's get out of here. The Johnston heels over hard, turning away, still making smoke, guns still firing. And now they wait, roughly 2.5 minutes to impact. The Kumano sees the torpedo wakes and takes evasive action, but she's too big, too slow. 3 torpedoes hit in rapid succession. The explosions blow enormous holes in her hull. Her bow twists and breaks. She slows, starts listing, falls out of formation. Crippled.
The Johnston's crew erupts in cheers. 1 destroyer, 1 torpedo attack, and one of the most powerful cruisers in the Japanese fleet is out of the battle. Evans allows himself a small smile. Good shooting. Now let's see what else we can do. But the Japanese are angry now, and they're coming for the Johnston with everything they have. Here's where this story goes from incredible to absolutely insane. The Johnston should have run, should have hidden in the smoke. That's doctrine. That's survival. Evans does the opposite. He charges back in. All ahead flank. Come around to course 270. We're going back. Hagen stares. Skipper, they know where we are. They're targeting us with everything. Exactly, which means they're not shooting at the carriers. Helmsman, steady on 270. The Johnston turns back toward the Japanese fleet. The crew can't believe it. They survived 1 attack run, and now the captain is taking them back for more. But if Evans is going back in, they're going with him. The guns keep firing. The crews are working so fast they're moving on pure instinct. Gun Captain Ed Joss is drenched in sweat, hands blistered, but he never slows. Keep shooting. The old man wants hell, we'll give him hell. The Johnston plunges back through the smoke, and suddenly she's in the middle of the Japanese formation. Cruisers on both sides, destroyers ahead, the Yamato somewhere behind. It should be instant death. Instead, the Johnston turns toward the nearest battleship and opens fire. 5-inch shells against a battleship. It's like throwing rocks at a tank. But the Johnston's guns are firing so fast, with such accuracy, that the Japanese think they're taking fire from a cruiser. On the cruiser Chokai, officers are shouting, "We're under fire from an enemy cruiser." The captain looks through binoculars and sees the Johnston, clearly a destroyer. That's not a cruiser, that's a destroyer. But sir, the volume of fire, it can't be just 1 destroyer. The Johnston is firing so fast, maneuvering so wildly, making so much chaos that she seems like she's everywhere at once. The Japanese can't track her because she changes course suddenly, swings back, speeds up, slows down. There's no pattern. Evans is making it up as he goes, calling out course changes on instinct. And it's working. The Japanese are shooting with dozens of guns, but most are missing because the Johnston is too small, too fast, too unpredictable. But more hits land. They have to. A shell from the battleship Congo hits amidships, right in the engine room. The explosion is catastrophic. Steam lines rupture. Men die instantly. But somehow, the turbines keep running. The Johnston still has power. Another hit on the bridge. The shell explodes inside the pilot house, killing the helmsman, wounding several men. Evans is thrown across the bridge. Blood pours down his face. His left hand is mangled, fingers blown off. He gets up. The pilot house is wrecked. Controls smashed. The wheel is gone. Get the wounded below. We'll steer from aft. Hagen, take over here. Captain, you're wounded. Evans ignores him. He staggers out onto the bridge wing, looks at the battle. The carriers are still running. The other destroyers are making their attacks. The Johnston, shot to pieces, is still fighting. He makes his way aft through smoke and flame, past damage control fighting fires, past wounded being carried below. He reaches the aft steering station. I'm taking command back here. Get me communications to the gun mounts. We're not done yet. The Johnston keeps fighting for 2 more hours. 3 guns are destroyed, but the remaining 2 keep shooting. The torpedo tubes are empty. The engines are dying. Fires burn throughout the ship. The hull is breached in dozens of places. And she's still shooting. The crews fight with desperate courage. Men with no gunnery training take over when trained crews are killed. Engineers keep damaged engines running with duct tape and prayer. They put out fires as fast as the Japanese start them. Through it all, Evans commands from the fantail, voice hoarse, body wrecked, refusing to quit. The Japanese can't understand it. They've hit this destroyer dozens of times. She should be sinking, but she keeps shooting. At 8:30 a.m., the carrier Gambier Bay takes a direct hit. The shell punches through the hull, explodes in the engine room. She starts to slow. Evans sees it the mid-Johnston's fantail. He sees the Japanese cruisers closing in for the kill. He makes another impossible decision. Come left. Put us between that carrier and those cruisers. Make smoke. The Johnston, already damaged, already slow, turns and places herself directly between the Japanese shells and the carrier. Her smoke generators start pumping thick black smoke. The Johnston becomes a moving smokescreen, blocking the Japanese gunner's sight. For 15 minutes, the Johnston absorbs fire meant for the Gambier Bay. Shells hit her repeatedly. Men die. Fires burn. But the carrier is hidden behind the smoke. The Gambier Bay eventually sinks anyway, but those 15 minutes allowed hundreds of her crew to abandon ship safely. The Johnston does this again and again, positioning herself between the Japanese and the carriers, using her hull, her smoke, her guns, everything she has to protect the more valuable ships. One Callanan Bay survivor said later, "We could see the Johnston out there getting pounded. She was burning, listing, but every time a Jap cruiser had a clear shot at us, the Johnston would be there making smoke, shooting back, drawing their fire. That captain was saving our lives, and he knew it was costing him his ship and probably his life, but he never stopped." The destroyers Hull and Samuel B. Roberts do the same. They fight until they sink, buying time for the carriers. By 9 a.m., the Johnston is a floating wreck. 3 guns destroyed, torpedoes empty, engines dead or dying, fires everywhere, hull breached in dozens of places, water flooding in, and she's still shooting. The 2 remaining guns fire manually. The automatic systems are destroyed, so crews load shells by hand. Pure muscle, ramming them in, jumping back as the gun captain yanks the firing lanyard. It's exhausting. The shells weigh 54 pounds. Men are collapsing, but others take their place. A sailor named Donald Weller said later, "I don't know how we kept going. My arms felt like they'd fall off. My hands were bleeding. The heat was like an oven. But the gun captain kept yelling, 'Feed me!' And we kept feeding him shells, because if we stopped, we'd die. So we didn't stop." At 9:20 a.m., the Japanese destroyers move in close, circling the crippled Johnston. They can see the fires, the list, men preparing to abandon ship. They could sink her with a few more salvos. But something strange happens. A Japanese commander named Katayama is watching through binoculars. He sees the fires, the damage, the men on deck, and he sees the 2 remaining guns still firing, slowly, methodically, but still fighting. He lowers his binoculars and speaks to his gunnery officer. "Cease fire." The officer looks shocked. "Sir?" "I said cease fire. That ship has fought enough." The Japanese destroyer stops shooting. And then Katayama comes to attention on his bridge and salutes the Johnston. His crew sees him and salutes as well. Other Japanese officers see it and do the same. Across the fleet, officers and men who moments before were trying to kill the Americans are now saluting them. On the Johnston's fantail, Evans sees it. He sees the destroyer stop shooting. He sees the salutes. He turns to Hagen. "We'll all be damned. They understand." 9:40 a.m., Evans gives the final order. "All hands, abandon ship. This is not a drill. May God have mercy on us all." Men make their way topside, helping the wounded. Life jackets are distributed, rafts are cut loose. Evans helps men over the side. He makes sure the wounded get into rafts. Hagen waits with him. "Captain, we need to go. She's going to roll." "You go ahead, Bob. I'll be right behind you." Hagen knows what Evans is saying, knows what he's planning. "Skipper, that's an order, XO. Take care of the men." Hagen salutes, tears streaming. "It's been an honor, sir." "The honor's been mine." Hagen goes over the side. Evans stays on the fantail, watching the Johnston die. At 9:45 a.m., the USS Johnston rolls to port and begins to sink. The deck goes vertical, then she turns upside down. Men in the water watch, many crying as their ship slides beneath the waves, stern first. Ernest Evans goes down with her. Multiple survivors said they saw him still on the ship as she sank, standing tall, hand raised in salute. He was 42 years old. His body was never recovered. The retreat. At 9:25 a.m., 20 minutes before the Johnston sank, Admiral Kurita made a decision that still puzzles historians. He ordered the center force to withdraw. The Japanese fleet turned around and headed back, away from Leyte Gulf, away from the defenseless landing forces that were an hour away. Victory was within his grasp, and he retreated. Why? The official reports give several reasons: air attacks, submarines, need to regroup. But when you read personal accounts from Japanese officers, when you look at radio intercepts, a different picture emerges. They were scared. They'd expected easy targets. Instead, they'd encountered resistance so fierce, so aggressive, so insane that it shook their confidence. The Johnston had charged them alone. The other destroyers followed. They'd fought with such ferocity that the Japanese thought they were facing a much larger force. One intercepted transmission: "We are being attacked by multiple cruisers and destroyers. They are fighting like madmen. We cannot determine enemy force size." Another: "Heavy torpedo attacks. These ships fight like wolves. Recommend withdrawal." Kurita's chief of staff wrote in his diary, "The American destroyers attacked with such aggression, we believed we'd stumbled into a trap. The admiral feared American battleships were nearby, hidden in smoke. We withdrew before we lost more ships." Think about what this means. 7 American ships made 23 Japanese ships, including 4 battleships, turn around and run. And the lead ship, the ship that set the tone, with the Johnston. When Evans charged at 7:10 a.m., he started a chain reaction. He showed what was possible. He proved that courage could overcome firepower. The Japanese never recovered. After Samar, the Japanese Navy became incredibly cautious. They'd flee at first contact. They'd refuse to engage even with superior forces. The Johnston had broken something in them. They couldn't handle that American sailors could be just as fearless, just as willing to die as any samurai warrior. The legacy? Ernest Evans was awarded the Medal of Honor posthumously. The citation calls his action one of the most gallant and heroic acts in naval history. He was the first Native American in the Navy to receive it in World War II. But the real legacy is what the Johnston proved, that courage is contagious. When the Johnston charged alone, she showed the other ships what was possible. The Hull followed. The Heermann followed. The Samuel B. Roberts, the smallest ship, saw what the destroyers were doing and charged in too. The pilots saw it and made attack runs with depth charges and machine guns, anything they had. Because if the destroyers could be that brave, they could too. The Johnston's crew could have refused, could have hesitated. Instead, they followed, every one of them. They stayed at their posts. They fired until the barrels glowed. They loaded torpedoes under fire. They fought fires while shells exploded around them. Because their captain wasn't asking them to do anything he wasn't willing to do himself. They saw his courage, and it gave them courage. 141 survivors were rescued after 2 days in the water. Many more died from exposure, wounds, sharks. But every survivor said the same thing. Captain Evans was the bravest man they ever knew. He'd taken an impossible situation and turned it into a fighting chance. Robert Billy, a gunner's mate, attended reunions until he died at age 93. He always said, "People ask if I was scared. Of course I was terrified. But I was more scared of letting the old man down. He believed in us. We weren't going to fail him. We'd die first." In 2019, researchers found the Johnston wreck in over 20,000 feet of water, deeper than any shipwreck ever discovered. The photos show her broken but recognizable. Her gun still trained out, still in firing position, still fighting after 75 years. In Oklahoma, at Pawnee Tribal Headquarters, there's a memorial to Evans. The inscription reads, "He charged when others ran. He fought when victory was impossible. He gave his life so that others might live. He is the warrior spirit of our people." Conclusion.
On October 25, 1944, a Japanese fleet that should have won came face to face with a force that refused to lose. A captain who could have followed doctrine and died quietly chose to attack and died fighting. A crew who could have given up chose to fight until their ship sank. And because of those choices, thousands of American soldiers on Lady Beaches lived. They survived. They came home. They had children and grandchildren who never knew how close they came to not existing. The battle off Samar lasted 3 hours. The Johnston fired over 800 shells, launched 10 torpedoes, took at least 40 hits, and fought the most powerful naval force Japan had to a standstill. One ship. At Samar, something different from other last stands happened. The small force won. The destroyers of Taffy 3, outgunned 40-1, fought so fiercely they made the Japanese fleet retreat. And it started with the Johnston, with Ernest Evans looking at impossible odds and deciding that impossible just meant you had to fight harder. Evans had said during training, and his crew remembered, courage is contagious. When one man stands up, others will follow. When one ship fights, others will fight. You just have to be the first one to stand up, and you can never let them see you quit. On October 25, 1944, Ernest Evans and the USS Johnston stood up first, and because they did, courage spread through Taffy 3 like wildfire. 7 ships became a fleet in the minds of the enemy. Impossible became possible. The Johnston is still down there, 20,000 feet deep, guns trained on her last target, a steel tomb for 186 brave men who refused to accept defeat. But she's more than a wreck. She's proof that courage matters, that leadership matters, that one person willing to stand up, willing to fight, willing to sacrifice everything can change history. The Japanese fleet had every advantage that morning: size, firepower, speed, armor, everything, except one thing. They didn't have Ernest Evans. They didn't have men who would fight their ship until it literally sank. They didn't have the courage of the USS Johnston. And that made all the difference. So when someone tells you one person can't make a difference, that individual courage doesn't matter, that standing against impossible odds is pointless, remember the Johnston. Remember that one destroyer charged a fleet and made them blink. Remember that courage is contagious. Remember that sometimes the impossible becomes possible because somebody refuses to accept any other outcome. The USS Johnston. Alone, unafraid, unforgettable. That's why, 80 years later, we're still telling her story.